Gabriel Fernandez was only 8 years old when he was murdered, but before that, he begged for help. He asked his teacher if it was normal for a mom to shoot you with a BB gun. He asked if someone could adopt him. He wanted to know if he could be loved, if he was good enough to be saved. This is the true story of the boy no one believed until it was too late.
But then I felt bad for him because he said that his mom couldn't make it.
It began on February 20th, 2005, in Palmdale, California, a dusty suburb where the desert meets the edges of Los Angeles County and where sun-scorched streets disguise lives barely hanging together behind stucco walls and drawn blinds. Inside Antelope Valley Hospital, a boy was born weighing just over 6 pounds, quiet-eyed and calm, his tiny fists curled against his chest like he already knew he had to guard his heart. His name was Gabriel Daniel Fernandez. He was the youngest of 3. His mother, Pearl Cynthia Fernandez, held him briefly before turning her head away. The nurses noticed. There was no joy in her face, no awe, just blankness, irritation, like this child had interrupted something more important. One nurse would later recall that Pearl had muttered, "I don't want him," not once, but twice, before handing Gabriel off and asking how soon she could be discharged. Gabriel's father wasn't there. Arnold Contreras, gang-tied and in and out of jail, didn't come to the hospital and barely acknowledged the boy's existence for the first few months. Pearl was only 22, already overwhelmed by 2 other children, already worn by a chaotic life riddled with drugs, trauma and rage. She had no job, no stable home, no warmth to give, so Gabriel was given away, not formally, no paperwork, just passed along like a burden shifting hands, first to his great-uncle Michael, a quiet man who lived with his partner David in a modest, tidy home in West Covina. There, Gabriel thrived. He was a toddler surrounded by routine, fed, bathed, sung to, given a bed with blankets that smelled of laundry soap and a dresser stocked with clothes that fit. There was no screaming, no locks, no darkness. For 4 years, Gabriel was safe. Michael and David adored him. They taught him words, played with him in the yard, told him he was special. At night, they'd read to him. On weekends, they took him to the park. Gabriel smiled. He danced. He clung to them with trust in his arms. But Pearl wanted him back. Not because she missed him. Not because she suddenly became a mother, but because she feared losing control of her narrative. Family rumors suggested she was jealous of the love Gabriel was receiving, of the whispers that maybe Michael and David should raise him permanently. There were custody threats, ugly arguments. Eventually, Pearl called child services, claiming her uncle and his partner were turning Gabriel gay. And without any investigation into her claims or conditions, Gabriel was sent back to her, just like that. He was 6. Pearl was now living with her boyfriend, Isauro Aguirre, a towering man with a slow drawl and dead eyes. A security guard by title, but abusive and volatile by nature. He had a history of cruelty disguised as discipline, and viewed Gabriel not as a child, but as an obstacle, an offense. The day Gabriel walked through the door of that apartment in Palmdale, the light in his life began to dim. The apartment smelled of smoke and stale food. The walls were stained yellow near the ceiling fans. A couch sagged in the middle, its fabric torn and patched with duct tape. It wasn't the worst place a child had ever lived, but it wasn't a home. And the moment Gabriel stepped through that door, dragging a small blue backpack that held more hope than belongings, he knew something was wrong. Pearl didn't smile when she saw him. Isauro barely looked up from his spot at the dining table. Gabriel stood there, clutching the strap of his backpack, waiting for someone to kneel down, to say hello or welcome home, or even just his name. But no one spoke. Pearl pointed to a corner and told him to sit, not on the couch, on the floor. That night she served food to her other children, Ezekiel and Virginia, and skipped Gabriel entirely. When he asked if he could eat, Pearl snapped, "You ate before you got here, didn't you?" He hadn't. It was a pattern that began quietly, then grew sharper by the day. At first it was small cruelties, denying him dinner, locking him in a cupboard for crying, calling him names. Then it became something darker, calculated, systemic. Pearl called Gabriel the gay one. Isauro called him the bitch. They used words no 6-year-old should ever hear. They laughed when he flinched. They started to punish him for things he didn't do. The television was locked, the toys were removed. His bed was taken away and replaced with a cabinet, small and cramped, where he would sleep curled on himself with no blanket, no light, no way to tell whether it was day or night. Then came the hitting, open-handed at first, then fists, then belts, then objects, a metal hanger, a bat, a BB gun. Isauro Aguirre was a man who didn't just want to hurt, he wanted to erase. He seemed to take Gabriel's very existence as a threat. He burned Gabriel's skin with cigarettes. He forced the boy to eat cat feces from the litter box. He duct-taped his mouth shut when he cried, and Pearl, Gabriel's mother, watched it happen. Sometimes she joined in, sometimes she handed Isauro the tape, but Gabriel didn't hate her. He still called her Mom. At school, Gabriel tried to hide the bruises. He showed up late, often hungry, his eyes ringed with exhaustion, but he didn't withdraw. He didn't grow cold. He was still kind. His teacher, Jennifer Garcia, noticed right away. He was sweet, curious, always trying to help. He would volunteer to sharpen pencils for the class, quietly pick up crayons others dropped, and ask questions that broke her heart. "Is it normal for mums to hit their kids?" he once asked her, eyes wide with confusion. She hesitated. "No, Gabriel, it's not." "Another day," he asked. "Is it okay for a mom to shoot you with a BB gun?" She reported the injuries, again and again, bruises, fat lips, scabs. She called child services. She filled out reports. So did the school counselor. So did the principal. One time Gabriel showed up with clumps of hair missing. Another day he had writing on his face, in ink, that read, "I'm a liar." He still smiled. He still said, "Thank you." He still brought little cards to his teacher that said, "You are nice to me." Gabriel wanted to be loved so badly. He tried harder, tried to be better, quieter, invisible. He wrote a note to his mother once that said, "I'll be good if you love me." She tore it up in front of him. DCFS made notes. They sent social worker Stephanie Rodriguez to the house. She saw bruises but said nothing was life-threatening. She closed the case with a warning. No follow-up, no removal, no safety plan. Just a child left to survive in a house with no exits. And somehow, he still hoped, still believed. Gabriel once asked his teacher if there were families who adopted children who weren't babies. She asked why. "Because I want to be part of a family who loves me." The week Gabriel died, he was 8 years old and weighed just over 59 pounds. He had bruises across his ribs, cigarette burns on his scalp, BB pellets embedded in his lungs, and a broken heart that had been ignored by every adult with the power to protect him. But on Monday, May 20th, 2013, he showed up to school with a small paper flower he had folded himself. He gave it to his teacher, Jennifer Garcia, and said softly, "This is for you, because you're nice." She didn't know it would be the last time she'd ever see him. His face was swollen. There was a fresh bruise below his eye. His lips were cracked. He had trouble sitting down, she noticed again. And he flinched every time someone walked too close behind him. She reported it, again, but nothing came. Tuesday morning, Gabriel didn't come to class. The attendance clerk marked him absent, but didn't raise alarm. Not yet. Children missed days. But by Wednesday, Garcia was concerned. She called the house. No answer. She asked the principal to file another report. But the system had grown numb to Gabriel's name. No one responded. At home, Pearl and Isauro were escalating. There was no reason, no trigger. Gabriel had done nothing, but Isauro said the boy was acting gay, that he looked at him wrong, that he didn't clean fast enough. And Pearl, she didn't stop him. That day, Gabriel was slammed against the wall. Isauro forced him into a cold bath and held his head under. When he gasped for air, Pearl laughed. They made him kneel on uncooked rice for hours. They punched him in the stomach. They forced him to eat cat litter again. He vomited. Isauro made him clean it with his bare hands. That night, he slept in the cupboard again, duct-taped, bruised, shivering. On Thursday, he didn't move much. Pearl told the other children he was faking it, that he was just trying to get attention. Virginia, his sister, tried to sneak him water. Isauro caught her and screamed so loudly the neighbor banged on the wall. Gabriel didn't eat. That day, his stomach was already rupturing. He had internal bleeding, a cracked skull, 3 broken ribs. But still, he didn't cry. On Friday, May 24th, Isauro Aguirre beat Gabriel until he stopped breathing. At first, he tried to hide it, tried to clean him up. Pearl hesitated before calling 911. When paramedics arrived, they found Gabriel naked, limp, covered in wounds. His skin was mottled, his eyes barely open. There was soot in his stomach, later found to be from burned cigarettes he'd been forced to eat. He had BB gun pellets in his groin and neck, old fractures across his limbs. The medics worked on him there, on the floor, in the apartment, where nothing was ever safe. They rushed him to Children's Hospital Los Angeles. He had no brain activity. The nurses wept as they cleaned his small body. One of them whispered to another, "What kind of world lets this happen?" Gabriel was pronounced brain dead at 6 p.m. He died 2 days later, on Sunday, May 26th, after being removed from life support. The courtroom in downtown Los Angeles didn't feel big enough to hold the weight of what was being said. The trial of Isauro Aguirre began in October 2017, more than 4 years after Gabriel's death. The delay alone felt like its own injustice. But when the proceedings began, the testimonies, the photos, the medical reports, the jury quickly understood. This was not just a murder case. This was something deeper, something broken. Isauro Aguirre sat at the defense table in a navy suit and wire-rimmed glasses, clean-cut, upright. He looked like someone who had never raised his voice. But the prosecutors knew what he had done, and they would spend the next month dragging the truth piece by brutal piece into the light. They began with the evidence. Photos were shown of Gabriel's body, the bruises, the burns, the BB gun wounds, the fractured skull. Jurors gasped. Some looked away. Others began to cry. One woman had to be escorted out of the courtroom. The judge warned everyone these images were essential. They were not spectacle. They were proof. The medical examiner took the stand. He described internal bleeding, shattered bones, skin that had healed over injuries without proper treatment. He had been in pain for weeks, he said, severe, sustained pain. He paused, voice trembling. This wasn't just abuse, this was torture. Jennifer Garcia, Gabriel's teacher, testified next. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. He was a sweet boy, she said. Kind, gentle. He never hurt anyone. She recounted the days. Gabriel came in bruised. The questions he asked, the way he would whisper to her, "Please don't tell them I told you." And how she reported it. Again, and again, and again. Then came the social workers, Stephanie Rodriguez and Patricia Clement, 2 of the 4 later charged with child abuse and falsifying records, took the stand reluctantly. When asked why Gabriel hadn't been removed from the home, despite repeated reports of visible injuries, Rodriguez said he didn't appear to be in immediate danger. The courtroom went still. The prosecutor stepped forward and held up a photograph of Gabriel's face, swollen, bruised, with a black eye. "This isn't immediate danger?" he asked. Rodriguez looked down. The most damning testimony came from Pearl's own daughter, Virginia. She was barely a teenager now, but already carried the weight of what she'd seen. "They hit him," she said, "all the time, for everything." She described the cupboard, the beatings, the names they called him. She told the jury how she once tried to help Gabriel, to hide him or give him water, and was punished for it. "Did you ever see anyone help him?" the prosecutor asked. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "Pearl Fernandez pleaded guilty in a separate trial to avoid the death penalty. She received life in prison without parole. She never testified against Isauro. She never apologized." But Isauro Aguirre stood trial, and the question before the jury was not whether he killed Gabriel, but why. His defense claimed he snapped, that he was slow and didn't fully understand what he was doing, that he never meant to kill Gabriel, just to discipline him. The prosecutor stared at the jury and said flatly, "Discipline doesn't involve burning a child's body with cigarettes. Discipline isn't shooting someone in the face with a BB gun. Discipline isn't calling a child gay and beating him because of it. That is not discipline. That is hatred. That is evil." The closing arguments took 2 hours. The jury deliberated. For less than 7, they found Isauro Aguirre guilty of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of torture, the sentence, death. The news of the verdict reverberated beyond the walls of the courtroom. Isauro Aguirre, sentenced to death, sat motionless when the verdict was read. No emotion, no apology. His face, cold and unreadable, gave no indication of the suffering he had caused or the child he had destroyed. But for Gabriel's family and the public who had followed every twist of the case, it wasn't enough, because Gabriel wasn't just failed by one man. He was failed by many. The 4 social workers who had ignored report after report, Stephanie Rodriguez, Patricia Clement, Kevin Baum, and Gregory Merritt, were indicted on charges of child abuse and falsifying public records. It was the first time in California's history that public officials were criminally charged in connection with a child's death. The move made headlines. Advocates called it a turning point, a warning, but even that accountability slipped. In 2020, an appellate court threw out the charges, ruling that their conduct, however negligent or incompetent, did not meet the legal standard for criminal prosecution. The case was dismissed. The public was outraged, because by then the world had seen Gabriel, his photos, his drawings, his handmade cards to his teacher, the footage from his birthday party where he smiled with frosting on his face. Just months before he would be dead, his name had become a rallying cry. The Netflix docuseries The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez aired in 2020, pulling back the curtain on the systemic rot that allowed a little boy to suffer for months while people took notes and did nothing. It featured interviews with teachers, journalists, experts, and the jurors who couldn't sleep after seeing the autopsy photos. People who watched the show flooded social media with tears and anger. "I've never cried like this over a documentary," one viewer wrote. He told people he was being hurt, and no one believed him. The outrage sparked legislative proposals. In California, lawmakers introduced bills to increase transparency and accountability within child protective services. There were calls to require stricter follow-ups after abuse reports, better training, stronger protocols. But bureaucracy is slow, change is slower, and for Gabriel, none of it came in time. His mother, Pearl Fernandez, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. In her plea deal, she avoided trial and avoided facing the people who knew what she had done. She made a short, prepared statement in court. "I want to say I'm sorry to my children," she said. "I wish Gabriel was alive." There were no tears. No one in the courtroom responded. In prison, Pearl was attacked by other inmates, once beaten so badly she had to be hospitalized. Still, She never took full responsibility. She filed a petition in 2021 to have her sentence reduced, claiming she was a victim of trauma and her mental health was misunderstood. It was denied. Gabriel's father, Arnold Contreras, had sat silently through much of the trial. He had not been there for his son's life, but he showed up for his death. During the victim impact statement, he broke down. "I failed him," he said, voice cracking. "I wasn't there. I didn't protect him." But no one had. The house on East Avenue Q10 in Palmdale, where Gabriel spent his final days, was emptied and later abandoned. The cupboards were cleaned, the tape removed. But the darkness of that space remained in the town's memory. In classrooms across California, teachers now speak Gabriel's name when they talk about mandatory reporting. In social worker training courses, his case is used as a benchmark of what should never happen again. Some schools now post signs that read, "See something, say something, be someone for Gabriel." Jennifer Garcia, Gabriel's teacher, still keeps some of his drawings. She left her job not long after his death. Burnout, grief, anger, it became too much. But she still speaks about him when asked. "He was a kind boy," she says. "He didn't grow bitter. He never gave up on love." That's the part people don't talk about. He still believed someone would come save him. In the end, no one did. But his story did something else. It cracked the armor. It forced a city, a state, a nation to look directly at the price of indifference, to stare into the face of a child who begged for help and was met with silence. Gabriel Daniel Fernandez, born February 20th, 2005, died May 24th, 2013, 8 years old, and he mattered.